He had always loved music. Even as a child, he would hum melodies and tap rhythms on anything he could find. The small room he lived in was always filled with the soft sound of his voice or the gentle strum of a borrowed guitar. While other children ran outside to play or spent hours in front of screens, he would sit quietly, lost in his own world of notes and sounds. The neighbors sometimes heard him and would smile, thinking it was just a harmless hobby, but few understood the depth of his passion. Growing up, he faced many challenges. His family did not always see the value in music. They wanted him to focus on practical skills that could lead to a stable job. When he mentioned wanting to take music seriously, they would shake their heads and offer polite discouragement. Friends sometimes teased him too. They would laugh when he practiced scales or sang softly during breaks. Their words could be harsh, but he never let them stop him. He kept playing, even when the laughter felt like it was meant to push him away. Every day, after finishing school and chores, he would rush to his small corner with his guitar. The strings felt familiar, like old friends that would listen to his dreams and frustrations without judgment. He would practice the songs he loved and try to write new ones. Sometimes his fingers would fumble, and the sounds would be off, but he didn't give up. Every mistake was just another step toward improvement, another way to learn what he needed to fix. He often imagined what it would feel like to perform in front of others, to let people hear the music that lived inside him. But every time he pictured it, fear crept in. He feared being mocked, being told that he was not good enough. He feared seeing the same smirks he had seen so many times before. But alongside the fear, there was also hope. The hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would listen and understand. Someone would feel what he felt when he played. One evening, while he was practicing, he overheard a conversation about a local talent event. It was going to be held in the community hall, and anyone could participate. His heart raced as he thought about it. This could be the chance he had been waiting for. The thought of standing on a stage, with lights on him and people watching, made his stomach twist with nerves, but it also made his heart beat faster in excitement. He knew that if he wanted to share his music, he had to try, no matter how scary it felt. The next few days were filled with preparation. He practiced harder than ever, refining every note, memorizing every chord, and singing each lyric until it felt natural. He imagined the audience, their expressions, their reactions. He knew he could not control what they would think, but he could control how well he played. He reminded himself that the music mattered more than the approval of others. It was about giving a piece of himself to the world, even if only for a few minutes. When the day of the event arrived, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. The hall was buzzing with people preparing to perform. Others were chatting, laughing, and showing off their skills. Some had flashy instruments, colorful outfits, and confident smiles. He felt small in comparison, wondering if he truly belonged there. But as he held his guitar and looked at the notes he had written, a calm determination took over. This was his moment, and he was ready to face it. As he stepped forward to sign up, some of the onlookers noticed him. A few whispered and laughed, commenting on his quiet demeanor and simple guitar. He felt their eyes on him, their judgment weighing heavy. For a moment, doubt crept in, and he wondered if he had made a mistake. But he took a deep breath, reminding himself why he was there. Music was his voice, and he was not going to let fear silence it. He found a quiet corner backstage and went over his song in his mind. The notes flowed through him, the lyrics vivid and full of meaning. Each chord was a memory, a feeling, a story. He closed his eyes and let himself feel every note, every rhythm. The world outside faded, leaving only him and the music. It was a familiar comfort, like sitting in his room at home, even though he was surrounded by strangers. When it was finally his turn, he walked to the stage. The lights were bright, and the crowd looked at him with curiosity and some skepticism. A few snickers reached his ears, but he pushed them aside. He adjusted the strap on his guitar, positioned himself, and took a deep breath. Then he began to play. At first, the sounds were quiet and hesitant, like a fragile thread being stretched across the hall. The audience murmured and shifted in their seats. Some still looked doubtful, whispering to each other. But as he continued, something changed. The music grew stronger, more confident. His fingers moved with precision and emotion, and his voice carried the story of his journey. Each note was filled with honesty, each chord a reflection of his dedication. Some in the audience began to pay closer attention. The laughter faded, replaced by surprise and intrigue. The melody wrapped around the room, touching ears and hearts alike. Even those who had doubted him could not ignore the sincerity and passion in his performance. He poured himself into the music, letting every fear and hope flow through his fingers and voice. As he reached the end of his song, the last notes lingered in the air. There was a moment of silence, a pause that felt both endless and perfect. Then, a few hands clapped, tentative at first but growing stronger. Others followed, some whispering words of praise, some with eyes glistening. He looked up, and for the first time he saw understanding in the faces around him. They had heard more than just notes. They had heard a story, a heart, a soul. He stepped off the stage, feeling a mix of relief and joy. His hands were trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the overwhelming emotion of sharing himself and being recognized. He realized that this moment, this small victory, was the start of something new. It was proof that persistence, courage, and passion could create change, even in the face of doubt. As he walked through the hall afterward, people approached him with kind words and smiles. Some admitted they had doubted him, some shared how the music had touched them, and a few asked about his songs. It was more than he had hoped for, and yet it felt natural. He had simply done what he loved, and in return the world had listened. That night, he returned home with a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. The room felt brighter, the guitar familiar and welcoming. He sat down and strummed a few soft notes, not for anyone else this time, but for himself. Music had always been his refuge, his companion, his voice. And now he knew it could also be a bridge to others, a way to connect hearts and minds, even those who had once mocked him. He thought about the journey ahead, knowing that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments of fear, but he also knew that the strength he found tonight would carry him forward. He had asked to perform, faced the mockery, and found a way to let his music speak. And that was a power no laughter could ever take away. He smiled softly, feeling a quiet pride, and began to dream once more of the songs yet to be written and the stories yet to be shared. The moment he stepped into the crowded hall, the air seemed heavier. He had imagined this scene countless times, but the reality was different. People were chatting, laughing, and moving about, some looking at him with curiosity, others with thinly veiled amusement. He could feel their eyes on him, scanning his simple guitar and unassuming clothes, and a small knot of nervousness formed in his stomach. He told himself it was just part of the process, that fear often came before something meaningful. Still, the whispers around him made him shift uneasily. He tried to focus on the music, repeating the melody in his mind and feeling the rhythm beneath his fingers. But the sneers and quiet laughter grew louder in his awareness. A group of young men sitting near the front smirked and nudged each other, pointing at his guitar and whispering things he could not quite make out. A few of the women near the side rolled their eyes and chuckled under their breath. He had hoped for curiosity, for even mild interest, but the room was filled with doubt and mockery instead. He thought about walking away, telling himself that maybe this was not the right place, that maybe he would try another day. But the music inside him would not let him quit. He had dreamed of this for too long, worked too hard, and felt too much to turn back now. The whispers and laughter could not erase the hours of practice, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices he had made just to get this far. He took a deep breath, holding it like a shield, and stepped toward the small stage at the front. The moment his foot touched the wooden platform, the laughter became more distinct. Someone made a loud joke about his appearance, and a few people around them laughed too. He felt the sting, the burn of embarrassment, and the familiar temptation to shrink away, to disappear. But he remembered why he was there. He remembered the countless evenings alone, strumming chords and singing in a room where no one could hear him. The music had always been his truth, and now it was time to let it speak. He positioned his guitar and adjusted the strap. His hands trembled slightly, but he ignored it. He began with a few quiet strums, testing the sound, letting it fill the room. The initial notes were small and uncertain, almost fragile, and he knew some in the audience were ready to dismiss them. A few whispers of derision floated toward him, but he did not falter. He reminded himself that the first step was always the hardest, that patience and persistence often looked like weakness at first. He started to sing, his voice soft but clear. The words carried his story, the struggles, and the dreams that had guided him through years of doubt. The crowd shifted, some out of curiosity, some out of impatience. The laughter continued, but slowly, a few people began to notice the sincerity in his performance. They leaned forward, their eyes narrowing slightly, trying to understand what made him different from the many others who had tried and failed to capture attention before. As he played, he felt himself sinking deeper into the music. Each chord and note became a lifeline, connecting him to the room despite the initial hostility. He could see some faces starting to change, the sneers softening into surprised frowns. The mockery had not stopped him yet, but it was beginning to shift. The story in his song was resonating with a few, quietly, like a ripple moving through still water. But the struggle was not over. A group of teens in the back snickered loudly, pointing and making faces. Someone even mimicked his movements in a sarcastic way, drawing a few more laughs. His heart ached with the sting of their mockery, and for a moment, he felt the weight of shame pressing down on him. Doubt tried to creep back in, whispering that maybe he was not meant to do this, that maybe he had misjudged his place in the world. He closed his eyes, taking a long, steadying breath. He imagined the small room at home, the quiet nights filled only with his music. He remembered how music had always comforted him, how it had been a friend and a confidant. If it had been enough for him, it could be enough for this moment. The laughter and the mockery were just background noise, obstacles to pass through, not the truth of his talent. The truth was in the music, and he would let it shine. Slowly, he poured more energy and emotion into his performance. His strumming grew more confident, the melody richer, the lyrics more heartfelt. He sang not to impress anyone but to express the life he had lived, the challenges he had faced, the joy he had found in creating something real. He could feel the tension in the room beginning to shift. The whispers were still there, but now they were mixed with quiet murmurs of surprise and attention. He noticed one older man in the audience who had stopped whispering and was leaning forward, his eyes fixed on the performer. There was a softness in the man's gaze, a recognition of effort and authenticity. Another woman had her hand over her mouth, her eyes glistening as if she had caught the emotions that were spilling out through the music. Slowly, the room that had been filled with mockery began to listen. Even as some continued to laugh or scoff, the majority of the audience was captivated by the transformation. The performer's vulnerability, his honesty, and the depth of his emotion were undeniable. The music was no longer just a collection of notes. It had become a bridge between him and the people watching. The room's energy was shifting, the mockery losing its power as genuine admiration started to take its place. He kept playing, letting every feeling he had stored for years flow through the strings and into the air. The laughter that had once stung now sounded distant, like it belonged to another world. He realized that true courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to continue despite it. He could see the impact of his dedication in the faces around him, and it strengthened his resolve to keep going, to finish the song with every ounce of his being. As he reached the final notes, the room fell into a hush. The music lingered, delicate and strong at the same time. Then, one by one, people began to clap, some softly at first, unsure, and then more confidently as the applause grew. A few even wiped their eyes, moved unexpectedly by the emotion they had witnessed. He had faced their mockery and turned it into a shared moment of human connection. He stepped off the stage with a mixture of relief, pride, and exhaustion. The adrenaline still pulsed through him, but it was now accompanied by a deep sense of fulfillment. The mockery had been real, sharp, and painful, But it had not stopped him. His music had spoken, and for some, it had been more powerful than they had expected. The realization filled him with quiet joy and a renewed sense of purpose. People approached him afterward, some offering congratulations, others sharing how touched they had been by his performance. A few admitted they had doubted him, and in that moment, he saw a change not only in their perception of him but in their own understanding of music and dedication. It was a subtle victory, but a profound one, marking the first step in a journey that would carry him further than he had ever imagined. That night, as he walked home, the cold air brushing against his face, he thought about what had happened. The fear, the mockery, the doubt. They had all been part of the experience, but they had not defined it. What defined it was his courage to continue, to let his music speak even when the world seemed against him. He smiled softly, feeling the warmth of accomplishment, and knew that this was just the beginning of something much larger. He returned home, his guitar cradled in his hands, and sat quietly, replaying the performance in his mind. The emotions were still raw, the memory of the laughter and sneers still present, but they no longer held the power to wound him. Instead, they were a reminder of the obstacles he had overcome, of the resilience and determination that had brought him this far. Music had always been his refuge, and now it was also his victory, proving that passion and persistence could triumph over doubt and mockery. The next day he could hardly sleep. The memory of the audience, their initial mockery, and the moments when their expressions had begun to change replayed endlessly in his mind. He kept thinking about how fragile confidence could be, and yet how powerful a single performance could feel. He picked up his guitar early in the morning, strumming softly, reliving the music he had played and imagining the next chance to perform. He decided to practice differently this time. He focused on emotion rather than perfection, letting each note carry a story. He realized that the mockery had challenged him to reach deeper, to show a truth that could not be ignored. Every chord and every lyric became a reflection of his journey, of the struggle, the hope, and the courage he had built over the years. He was not performing for applause or recognition. He was performing to share something real. When the next performance opportunity came, he felt a mix of nervousness and determination. The hall was again crowded, but this time he noticed faces from the previous day. Some were skeptical, still recalling their initial amusement, while others were curious, remembering the surprising talent they had seen. The air was thick with anticipation, and he felt it pressing on him, testing his resolve. He had to prove not just skill but authenticity. He adjusted his guitar and took a long breath, feeling the familiar warmth of the wood against his hands. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but he let them flow without fear. The audience listened quietly at first, uncertain. Some eyes narrowed, some people whispered, and a few exchanged looks that betrayed their growing interest. He began to sing, his voice steady, carrying the weight of all the practice, all the nights of solitude, and all the moments he had doubted himself. As he continued, something remarkable happened. The people who had once mocked him started to lean forward, caught in the depth of his music. The story behind each song, the raw emotion in every note, reached them in a way that words could not. Some faces softened with surprise, some with reflection, and a few even displayed hints of admiration. The music was no longer just sound. It had become a bridge, connecting him with the listeners in a quiet, undeniable way. He could feel the energy of the room shift, like a tide slowly changing its direction. The laughter and ridicule of the past performance were gone, replaced by a focused attention that seemed almost sacred. He played with more confidence now, letting himself flow with the rhythm rather than controlling it. Each strum and each chord carried not just melody, but the story of his journey, the resilience, the loneliness, and the hope that had fueled him. Some audience members whispered to each other, pointing out the emotion and skill in his performance. A few even wiped at their eyes, moved unexpectedly by the sincerity that radiated from him. The performer noticed the change but did not let it distract him. He had learned that the true power of music lay in expression, in honesty, and in letting every fear and hope pour into the sound. The transformation of the audience was a natural response, not a goal. He reached the middle of his set, where the song became more intense, more personal. His fingers danced across the strings, moving in perfect harmony with his voice. The lyrics told of dreams and struggles, of nights spent in quiet practice, and the courage it took to stand in front of people despite doubt. He could see people leaning forward, silent, captivated. Some faces were streaked with tears, others with awe, and a few even showed hints of shame for their previous skepticism. The music had broken down the walls of judgment, creating a space where emotion was free and raw. The most powerful moment came when he played a section of the song he had written about vulnerability and hope. The melody was gentle yet firm, and the words carried a truth that seemed to hang in the air. People's reactions were immediate. Some gasped quietly, some held their hands over their hearts, and others simply stared, unable to move. It was a shared experience, unspoken yet deeply understood. The audience had gone from mocking to moved, caught in the spell of a talent they had not expected and an honesty they could not ignore. He felt a surge of energy as the connection deepened. The room was no longer divided between performer and audience. It had become a single entity, united by the music. Every note he played was met with quiet attention, every chord with a shared emotion. He realized then that the real power of performance was not in applause or recognition, but in touching lives, even in the smallest way. His music had created empathy, understanding, and a moment of pure human connection. As he reached the end of the song, he allowed the last notes to linger, letting the silence fill the room. The impact of the performance was evident. People were still, absorbed in their own reflections, some with tears in their eyes, others with soft smiles. He felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond recognition or praise. He had shared a part of himself, unguarded and true, and it had resonated. That was a victory far greater than he had ever imagined. After the song ended, the audience erupted into applause, but it was different this time. It was sincere, heartfelt, and loud. People who had mocked him before were now among the most enthusiastic. Some came forward to compliment him, others simply lingered, not wanting to break the emotional spell. The performer stepped back, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. He had not only survived the mockery of the past but had transformed it into genuine appreciation. In the days following, word of his performance began to spread. People talked about the music that moved them, about the courage of the young man who had faced ridicule and yet shone brightly. Invitations came for more performances, small opportunities at first, but each one a chance to continue sharing his gift. The young man felt a quiet joy in knowing that his music could touch people, that the vulnerability he had once feared could become a bridge to connection. He continued to practice each day, focusing on emotion and authenticity, refining his skills while keeping the heart of his music intact. He understood now that talent alone was not enough. It was the honesty and the courage to express oneself that made the difference. Every note he played, every song he wrote, carried the story of his journey, a story that others could feel and relate to, even without words. He thought often about the people who had mocked him initially, not with anger, but with gratitude. They had challenged him, tested his resolve, and given him the opportunity to rise above doubt and fear. The experience had taught him that obstacles, criticism, and ridicule were part of growth, not the end of the journey. He had learned to let music speak louder than judgment, to let truth shine through effort and emotion. As he prepared for future performances, he carried the memory of that transformative audience with him. He remembered the faces, the tears, the surprise, and the connection that had formed. It became a source of strength, a reminder that courage and persistence could change minds and hearts. Each song he played, each chord he struck, was infused with that knowledge, a quiet confidence born of experience. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and fear, but he also knew that he had discovered something invaluable: the ability to touch people, to convey emotion, and to turn skepticism into empathy. The journey of music was no longer just about skill or recognition. It was about connection, understanding, and the courage to remain true to oneself. And so, he continued, playing each song with all the honesty he could muster, letting every note be a testament to his dedication and his heart. The transformation of the audience had shown him the power of music, not just to entertain, but to heal, to inspire, and to bridge the gap between strangers. He had faced mockery, doubt, and fear, and in the process, discovered the profound impact of authenticity and courage. The day of the performance arrived, and he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness unlike anything he had experienced before. Every step toward the hall made his heart beat faster. Memories of past mockery and the brief recognition he had received the last time swirled in his mind. He knew this performance could be a turning point, a moment where his music could truly reach people in a deep way. The thought both thrilled and frightened him. He arrived early and set up in a quiet corner to warm up. His guitar felt comforting in his hands, and he strummed a few chords to steady his nerves. The hall was starting to fill with people, some familiar faces from his last performance, some new, curious about what they might hear. The air buzzed with anticipation and whispered conversations. Some seemed skeptical, waiting to see if the young musician could meet the expectations they had heard about, while others looked genuinely curious. As he waited backstage, he ran through his song in his mind. He thought about every word, every note, and the story each part told. He focused on the emotions behind the music, the struggles, the hopes, the joy, and the quiet moments of reflection that had shaped his life. This time he decided he would let the audience feel all of it. He would not hold back no matter the reaction. Music had always been his voice, and he was ready to let it speak freely. When it was finally his turn, he stepped onto the stage with a steady, determined pace. The lights were bright, and the crowd's chatter dimmed as all eyes turned toward him. For a brief moment, he felt the old fear creep back, the familiar sting of past mockery. But he took a deep breath and reminded himself of everything he had overcome. The music inside him demanded to be heard, and no fear could silence it. He positioned his guitar, adjusted the strap, and began to play. The first notes were soft, deliberate, almost hesitant, but they held a quiet strength. The audience leaned forward, drawn by the sincerity in his playing. The melody flowed naturally, carrying with it the emotions he had spent years refining. As his voice joined the guitar, the story unfolded clearly, touching the hearts of those listening. At first, some people remained skeptical, uncertain how to react. Whispers and quiet movements continued, but their tone had shifted. The curiosity that had replaced ridicule was palpable. The audience was starting to realize that this performance was different, that it was not just skill being displayed but honesty, vulnerability, and passion. The young musician felt this shift and allowed it to guide him, letting the music grow richer, more expressive. He played with a focus he had never felt before. Every chord and every note was infused with emotion, every lyric a reflection of his journey. The audience began to respond in ways that surprised even him. Eyes widened, lips parted in silent awe, and some began to wipe away tears. The power of the music was evident. It was no longer merely entertainment, but a shared experience that united performer and listeners in a quiet understanding. He could see the faces of people who had doubted him before, now changed by the music. Some leaned forward, captivated, their skepticism replaced by admiration. Others had tears in their eyes, moved by the depth of feeling he conveyed. It was a remarkable transformation, a testament to the authenticity and courage behind his performance. The music had broken through walls of doubt and reached the hearts of those who had initially mocked him. As the song progressed, the intensity grew. The melody swelled with emotion, and his voice became more confident and expressive. The audience was caught in the moment, some completely silent, others whispering softly, moved by the honesty in the lyrics and the feeling in the music. The young musician felt a deep connection with them, a bond that transcended words. He realized that this was the true power of performance, the ability to move hearts and change perceptions through art. He reached the most emotional part of the song, a section he had written to express vulnerability, hope, and resilience. The notes were gentle yet powerful, and the lyrics resonated deeply. The audience's reactions were immediate. Tears flowed freely for some, while others held their hands to their hearts, overwhelmed by the raw honesty of the performance. The atmosphere was electric with emotion, yet intimate, as if the hall had become a shared space of understanding and empathy. He noticed a few individuals who had been particularly critical or skeptical before, now visibly moved. Their expressions showed surprise, reflection, and even remorse for their earlier judgments. The music had changed them, if only for a moment, revealing the impact of courage and authenticity. He felt a quiet sense of triumph, not over them, but over the fears and doubts that had once held him back. The power of music to touch lives was more real than he had ever imagined. As the song neared its conclusion, he allowed the final notes to linger, filling the room with a soft, resonant sound. The silence that followed was profound, a pause where the audience seemed to absorb everything they had experienced. Then, applause began, hesitant at first, then growing in strength and enthusiasm. People stood, some clapping loudly, others whispering words of praise and admiration. The young musician stepped back, feeling a wave of relief, pride, and deep satisfaction. After the performance, many approached him to express their gratitude and appreciation. Some shared how the music had touched them personally, how it had brought back memories, or inspired reflection on their own lives. Others complimented the courage and honesty in his performance. He listened, smiling quietly, humbled by the reactions. He realized that the true reward of music was not recognition or fame, but the ability to create connections and evoke genuine emotion. That evening, he returned home with a profound sense of accomplishment. The guitar felt familiar and comforting in his hands, a faithful companion through the highs and lows of his journey. He strummed softly, replaying parts of the performance in his mind, savoring the emotions and the moments of connection. He knew that this experience would stay with him forever, a reminder of what could be achieved through dedication, courage, and authenticity. He reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The mockery, doubt, and fear had all been part of the process, challenging him to rise above and to embrace his true self. Each obstacle had strengthened his resolve, teaching him the value of persistence and the importance of expressing his authentic voice. He felt gratitude for every challenge, knowing that they had led to a moment of profound human connection. In the days that followed, the memory of the audience's reaction stayed with him. He continued to practice and refine his skills, always focusing on emotion and honesty rather than perfection. He understood that music was a living expression of the heart, and that his journey was about more than technical ability. Each performance was an opportunity to touch lives, to share his story, and to inspire others through the power of art. The young musician also realized that the journey was ongoing. There would be more challenges, more performances, and more opportunities to face doubt and skepticism. But he now possessed a deeper confidence, born of experience and resilience. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. And he had discovered that authenticity, when combined with talent and dedication, could transform not only his own life but also the lives of those who listened. He continued to write and compose, each song a reflection of his experiences and emotions. The audience's response had shown him the power of vulnerability and truth, encouraging him to share more of himself with the world. He played with passion, letting every note and every word carry the essence of his journey. Music had become more than a hobby or a skill. It was a bridge, a language that could convey feelings beyond words and connect hearts in profound ways. And so, he moved forward, ready for the next performance, the next audience, and the next challenge. He had faced mockery and doubt, transformed fear into courage, and discovered the true power of music. The journey was far from over, but he now knew that every note played with honesty and every song sung with heart had the potential to create moments of connection and understanding that could last a lifetime. He smiled softly, holding his guitar close, and prepared to continue sharing his gift with the world. The days after his most moving performance were filled with quiet reflection. He continued to replay the experience in his mind, thinking about every face in the audience, every tear shed, every subtle nod of appreciation. It was unlike anything he had felt before. The mockery that had once haunted him seemed distant, replaced by the knowledge that his music had touched hearts. He walked through his routine of practice and reflection with a new sense of purpose, understanding that what he had achieved was only the beginning of a larger journey. He spent his mornings practicing, strumming his guitar, and singing each song with more emotion than ever. Each note he played carried the weight of his experiences, the long hours of practice, the doubts he had faced, and the courage he had summoned. Music was no longer just a way to express himself. It had become a tool to reach others, a bridge between his soul and the hearts of those who listened. Every chord resonated with authenticity, and every lyric told a story that people could feel. Word of his talent began to spread. People who had witnessed the previous performances shared the experience with friends and family. Some who had been skeptical before were now encouraging him to continue performing, praising his courage and honesty. Invitations arrived for small gatherings, community events, and local concerts. Each opportunity brought a mixture of excitement and nerves, but he approached them with the same quiet determination that had carried him through the mockery and doubt. When he prepared for each new performance, he focused not on impressing others, but on conveying truth. He remembered the faces that had once been doubtful, the emotions that had shifted during his last show. He knew that music had the power to create change, even if just for a moment. That understanding gave him confidence, allowing him to pour himself into each song with sincerity and heart. The audience's response was no longer the goal. It was a reflection of the honesty he put into his art. At one local concert, he found himself standing before a larger audience than ever before. The stage was modest, but the energy of the crowd was electric. He noticed some familiar faces in the front row, people who had once doubted him, now watching with anticipation and quiet respect. The memory of their earlier mockery and eventual admiration stayed with him, fueling his determination. He took a deep breath and began to play. The music flowed effortlessly. His fingers moved across the strings with precision, but more importantly, with emotion. His voice carried the story of his journey, the struggles and triumphs, the moments of doubt, and the victories born of persistence. As he sang, the audience listened intently, drawn into the world he created with sound. The laughter and mockery of the past had no place here. This was a space of understanding, of connection, and of shared humanity. Throughout the performance, he observed the audience's reactions. Some were visibly moved, wiping tears from their eyes or nodding along with the emotion in the music. Others sat in silence, fully absorbed in the story he was telling through melody and lyrics. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, realizing that his music was capable of bridging the gap between individuals, of creating empathy and understanding in ways that words alone could not. After the concert, many approached him to share their feelings. Some told him that his music had inspired them to pursue their own dreams despite fear or doubt. Others admitted they had judged him too quickly, and that witnessing his courage and dedication had changed their perspective. The young musician listened quietly, humbled by the impact his music had made. He understood that true triumph was not in applause alone, but in touching lives and inspiring others through sincerity and perseverance. Over time, his reputation grew. He performed in various venues, each time bringing the same authenticity and emotional depth to his music. He met people who had been deeply affected by his performances, individuals who felt empowered to embrace their own passions and talents. Through his journey, he learned that facing mockery and doubt was not a setback but a catalyst for growth, a chance to prove the strength of resilience and the importance of staying true to oneself. He reflected on the journey that had led him to this point. From the early days of practicing alone in his small room, facing teasing and doubt, to performing on larger stages and moving audiences with his music, he saw the power of persistence and courage. Every obstacle had taught him something valuable, and every performance had strengthened his confidence and refined his skills. The journey had not been easy, but it had shaped him into a performer who could inspire and connect with others on a deep emotional level. One evening, after returning home from a particularly successful performance, he sat quietly with his guitar. He replayed the songs in his mind, thinking about the people who had laughed at him and those who had been moved by his music. He realized that the journey had taught him more than just musical skill. It had taught him about human nature, about the power of empathy, and about the courage it takes to remain authentic in the face of doubt. He felt a quiet sense of pride and fulfillment, knowing that his music had become a source of connection and inspiration. He continued to write and compose, each song reflecting a piece of his journey and the lessons he had learned. His music became a living diary, capturing moments of struggle, hope, joy, and vulnerability. He found that the more honest he was in his expression, the more deeply people connected with his work. The applause and recognition were gratifying, but the true reward was the emotional impact his music had on others, the way it could touch hearts and change perspectives. He also began mentoring younger musicians, sharing his experiences and encouraging them to pursue their passions despite fear and doubt. He spoke about the importance of persistence, authenticity, and courage, drawing from his own journey of facing mockery and transforming it into meaningful connection. The lessons he had learned became a guiding force, helping others to find their own voice and strength in the face of challenges. As time went on, he performed for larger audiences, each experience reinforcing the power of music to connect people. He never forgot the moments of doubt and mockery that had once seemed insurmountable. They remained a reminder of the resilience and determination required to succeed. Each performance was a testament to the journey he had undertaken, a journey that began with a single act of courage and a desire to share his music with the world. In quiet moments, he reflected on the journey and the lessons it had brought. He understood that true triumph was not measured by fame or applause, but by the ability to touch lives, to inspire, and to create moments of connection through authenticity and passion. His music had become a language of emotion, capable of reaching across barriers and creating understanding where there had once been doubt. And so, he continued his journey, playing each song with heart, honesty, and courage. The mockery and skepticism of the past had been transformed into respect, admiration, and profound emotional connection. His music had become a force that could move people, inspire them, and create moments of beauty and understanding. He smiled quietly, holding his guitar close, knowing that every note played with truth had the power to change lives, including his own. The journey was ongoing, but he now faced it with confidence, resilience, and the knowledge that the music within him could touch the hearts of all who listened.